Okay, looks like everyone, the breakout rooms will close in 5 seconds.
Oh, I got too late. They're breaking out.
All right, it looks like everyone is back from the breakout groups. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had productive conversations. Next, we'll go around and hopefully you had the opportunity to select a volunteer to give 1 or 2 highlights from what you discussed in the group. Doesn't have to be more than a few sentences. We have 15 groups to go to and about, so let's try to keep it 1 to 2 minutes. With that, if you forgot to assign or select a volunteer, that might mean you're actually the facilitator is the volunteer. So with that, I will hand it to group 1 and David Gaspers.
Hi, Courtney. We had Robert Greer volunteer for our report back.
Sure.
Robert, you there?
I'm here, yeah. So yeah, we had a pretty good mix of people. It looked like, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but it looked like the first option had probably the most support. That is also the one that I supported. So I may be kind of misremembering, but it seemed nice in that it preserved a lot of contiguous park space. It preserved a lot of the trees there. There's a lot of discussion in our group about affordable housing and how much of this would be affordable. I don't know that we're really discussing that at this stage. I saw a comment, too much housing, number one. I think when we have a shortage of 50,000 affordable units in Denver alone, it's hard to say there's too much housing. One of the commenters, I think his name is Kevin, expressed some concerns about kind of ancillary easements regarding a small drainage area on the east side and also a walkway of some sort that I think was related to the golf course netting.
It's actually our netting, Robert. It's
your
our road, our drainage easement, and our netting. So yeah, I was concerned.
You put up the netting, okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you, group 1.
Right,
thank you very much.
Thanks,
Let's
guys.
move on
Appreciate
to,
it.
yeah, let's definitely move on to room 2, Owen.
Yeah, I think we got Benjamin was volunteering to give a couple of our highlight thoughts from that group on the 3 plans.
I apologize. I showed up to that group late, so I'll recount what I recall. We didn't like a lot of the layouts in general. We thought they could be optimized to handle traffic better. We were concerned about trucks and people and cars and bikes being handled the right way for each. We were concerned about the layout of the housing being something that was usable without out of the blue rewarding a developer with a windfall of a sudden park view and taking that away from the people who've honestly spent that money already. And lastly, we were extremely concerned about suboptimal usage of existing local resources. There's a lot of industrial and other developments going on in the area that we do not feel are either fully utilized, that could be repurposed, or that may not be accounted for in the studies related to the Park Hill Golf Course area.
Yeah, and this is Jackie. I was also in Owen's group, and just because Benjamin missed the first part, we also discussed that there was some concern about specifically where the housing was planned to be built, mainly on the east side of the land, especially for members of the Overlook community, where those both on the north of, I believe, 38th, and then right beyond like Dexter Court and Dexter Street, those potential residential houses around that area.
And
Great,
real
thank you
quickly,
very much.
this is Woody Garnsey. We also talked about the conservation easement and the fact that it's being ignored in this whole process, and that for the health and benefit, recreational benefit and public health, the whole community, that land should be retained as open space in full, and development should occur west of Colorado Boulevard in the 40th and Colorado area, and east of the land in underutilized land, not on the green space.
Thank you. Let's move to group 3, Jerome.
Yes, point 1, agreement. There's concern between ideas and agreements, because agreements seem to have been pretty fluid in the past. And so there's a trust issue in terms of bringing ideas and what are firm agreements in the next step in terms of what and who's agreeing to what and how solid are those agreements. Point 2, we're adamantly opposed to putting spreading out necessarily housing, if we have to do housing, in the park and blocking agreements. And again, we're back to agreements with people who had agreements at Overlook, and then now they have in part 1, they have a housing development directly behind them after they paid extra for a park view. Okay, so that's point 2. We like the idea of maximum, I think, maximum park space that is not bisected by 38th. And there's an industrial area just north of us, and it is a main highway through Andalia to get over to Colorado, and they come right down 38th. They turn left. There's tons of accidents on that. Yep. And I guarantee you it's 60 miles an hour down that street and down 35th. So we want no roads, not many roads into the park is what value we had. And I think, and we would like the parkway, dark parkway to go through the middle.
Appreciate that, Jerome. Thank you very much. We have group 4, Addison, and just a check. We are at 7:17 and we have a few more groups, I think 15, and we're on group 4 to get through. So before 7:30. So if we could just keep it brief to 1 or 2 things, so everyone has a chance to report back. So with that, 4, Addison.
Thanks, Courtney. All right, so our group talked a lot about affordable housing. We talked about the necessity of affordable housing, and also talked about challenging both some of the definitions and the mechanisms for affordable housing in this project. But we also heard that people are very concerned about density. They seem more comfortable with around 3 stories, maybe 4. Part of the concern around densities is that all of the parking and the concrete, and we want to be very intentional about reducing that footprint, having as few roads to the park as possible. And there was agreement on that, both in terms of traffic, but also the necessity of preserving as much park and open space as possible so that it continues to have that, that open and natural feel. I think that covers it.
Great, thank you so much. If we can move on.
This is Maria Flora. We also talked about the conservation easement that protects the land from development, and wondering how I personally could support any of these plans that are impermissible under the conservation easement. And that we didn't like Plan 3 because of all of the concrete and the parkways and the park becoming an amenity for the retail and the housing.
Thank you, Maria. Georgia, group 5. Georgia, are you there?
Here I am. Please, my group, pitch in if I get something wrong or I don't bring everything up. It felt to me like most people in our group preferred 100% open. Had stopped. Okay, there it is. And there was a sentiment expressed that that at least one individual felt forced to choose between 3 plans that included development when he really wanted to see 100% open space. It was mentioned if West Side is the master developer and sells plots to different developers, if the development plan goes forward, what's to keep the new purchasers, the new developers from adhering to any of these plans? We also didn't want any roads going through the park. We were worried about cutting down trees and doing as least of that as possible. We worried about the views. A lot of these plans felt to some like it wasn't a public park, that it was possible it would be like the 28th and Fairfax Park that is surrounded by development and is really only for the patrons of that area versus being really open to the public, that it felt more like a private park. Also, it was mentioned why not utilize the decaying properties that surround the park that seem ripe for anything that community members might want to have. That didn't seem, there was no mention in this of these properties around it that could be developed for affordable housing, a grocery store, whatever. When all was said and done, we preferred Plan 1, Greenways, because it was the most green space. But again, people worried about its proximity to Colorado Boulevard and cutting out the view and adding to traffic. We were told that there'd be a traffic study after the plan had been decided on, but that seems a little backwards.
Right. I think we're going to need to move on.
Anything else, you guys?
Yeah, I would like to interject on there. And there were several questions that I felt couldn't be answered. So hopefully we'll get some feedback on that.
Mm-hmm. And okay, we're going to move on to room 6. Will Wagenlander.
Yeah, so Felicia Rodriguez will be reporting out for us.
Okay.
Hi everyone, Felicia Rodriguez. So as far as this group, we did have a lot of vocal share about maintaining the conservation easement, but we tried to take an objective perspective and give feedback based off the information that was provided. This group agreed that the site work concept for parkways was the least liked in the group. There were concerns overall about how much park space is preserved. And then the largest concerns were increased density in traffic around Colorado Boulevard and Dahlia. And then the increase of residential being adjacent to the overlook at Park Hill, increased density of traffic and people. I do want to point out opportunity or strength that was discussed was an opportunity for the developers to look at a need for park amenities and space that address the youth need in the community, especially the youth violence prevention component of things, and also making sure that safe space is there for families in the community. Did I miss anything?
Sounds good. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That was great. Room 7, we have Roger.
Yeah, very briefly, we thought it was difficult to have a meaningful conversation about the options without knowing what kind of park space is park space, how tall is tall, how dense is dense, and how much affordable housing there might be. Given those unknowns, which we thought were important, the Parkways option 3, was the least favorite of the options provided. I will emphasize that, was least favorite because of a number of factors. One is the throughway of 38th Street. We thought that was, we didn't want that to break up the park area. And also there was less green space. And some of the things that we'd also talked about was to put as much development, if there has to be development, towards Colorado Boulevard, keep the park areas contiguous to maximize their potential utility, and be aware of not having a lot of speedways or throughways on some of the roadways in and around. That was brought up by a couple of people. So those were the high points.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate that. Eugene, roommate?
Yeah, so we had a very spirited conversation around the easement and some of the opportunities to have a desire for maximum open space. Conversely, we also had a fair amount of support for development that would be community friendly, walkable. There were some conversations around suggesting that more of any sort of commercial mixed use be closer to transit, closer to 40th and Colorado, and also opportunities on the east side so that folks who are already existing in the community would have places in close proximity to walk to. I think there were pros and cons with each of the 3 options. But as we've heard already tonight, sort of a pendulum swing between maximizing open space to really making sure that affordable housing and amenities that were walkable and accessible by the existing community were also present. That's a pretty high level summary. There was also a great deal of support for wanting to make sure that the open space was activated so that children and play and sports and recreation could be maximized as well. So I think those were some of the key themes to kind of capture the comments that we had across the board.
I think one other thing, Eugene, that we all had a question about was the easement with the golf course and the city buying. And I think if we had a clear clarification, conversations will go differently. But I think that's why a lot of people are in this space of this needs to be done this way or this needs to be done this way, because no one truly knows what has happened in that space.
Thank you. Muriel, for room 9. And we have just a few more minutes, so if we could just keep it down to 1 sentence highlight, please, so everyone has a chance.
Absolutely. So we actually talked about the concerns of much of what we talked about concerning the easement and how much space, open space is enough. Open space. We talked about the state of housing in Colorado, that we're looking at an exacerbated market where housing is just minimal, no matter what you're looking for, whether you're looking for the most modest of homes to either buy or to rent versus multi-million-dollar homes. It doesn't matter what you're looking for, we don't have it. So we're in the state of Colorado where we lack space, we lack housing for anybody. We talked about the importance of actually keeping enough space for those to actually enjoy the green areas in a neighborhood that they've been enjoying. We also talked about how many individuals who actually live in the area have been enjoying this land that has always been privately owned since the beginning of time. So we talked about those things. We talked about the importance of not obstructing views from those who actually are living in the neighborhoods and not going up so high and losing a lot of green, beautiful trees that exist to actually help the environment. So we did talk about all those things, but we also talked about the difference between affordable housing and attainable housing and what that actually means and being part of that affordable housing program versus not, and being able to allow good neighbors of anybody that you would want to live in your neighborhood. We're talking about teachers, we're talking about firefighters, we're talking about doctors, nurses, attorneys, things like that. These are individuals that are being priced out of the market. It doesn't matter what you do for a living, you're being priced out of the market if there's nothing available. So right now, I think we need housing for all on some level, and that's what our group has gone into detail. The best thing is to be able to give the best mix and be able to allow enough green area for enjoyment.
Great, thank you. Room 10, Kathy Spoon.
Okay, I'm here. Our strong push was to maximize, either preserve it as is or maximize the open space available. We acknowledge that you need mixed use residential here. Access to train station is important. We like the walkways on the second one the best, I believe. And don't put residential houses up against Colorado Boulevard. There was a concern about how tall the buildings would be, about preserving views. The bikeway was important. And I think those are the highlights. Thank you.
Room 11, Bill.
That would be me. I'm
Yes,
reporting
Jennifer.
for Bill. So yeah, very similar to what was just said. Concept 2 is the strong preference because of the amount of open space and that it kept the park together. However, there was still a lot of people who felt like the whole thing should remain green space, and they were worried about the process moving forward in light of ballot initiative 301 and the easement that's still on there. 3 was the least favorite because it breaks up the open space. Someone did like the parkway because it might help with traffic, but generally speaking, we didn't have a lot of opinions on 1, strong preference for 2, and then least liked 3.
Right. Thank you. Room 12. Jay?
Yes, so a lot of what's been said, I'll just focus on the key points. I think number 3 was the least favorable, and like the major concerns were, quality of life and being able to preserve as much green space as possible, concern about the extra traffic and safety of kids being around that, the obstruction of views for those that are have purchased homes near the golf course. But then I think we got into a constructive conversation about what the trade-offs could potentially be moving forward with, possible commercial businesses, the things that are needed, making sure, grocery store for food desert, black and brown opportunities for business, and other things that will accommodate the residents that live in the area. And then also I will hit on the key point that there was the worry of the trust issue about what the easement is and what we've come to today.
Right.
But task at hand, I think most people were in favor of number 2.
Thank you, Jay. Room 13, we had Ryan and Gretchen were the facilitators.
Hi, my name is Krista De Herrera, and we spoke a lot in depth of the different acres that the park space allows for each one of the concepts. Hands down, we wanted to look at the issues, the strengths, and the thoughts. The issues were that we did not like any roadways to be put through any of the parks. So hands down, number 3 concept, we did not enjoy at all. We liked to look at cutting and pasting a couple of ideas from 1 and 2 to really exemplify the stay of existing established tree canopies. Very important to keep the access to the park along 30th. Utilizing the already parking space and the industrial use for the driving range building for possible future city park development sites for access to use for that park. We were really concerned about the overlook for the overlook homeowners that will not have their view if any buildings were built in front of their paid for views. So we wanted to keep the park use streamlined, and we're really enjoyed the fact that the Tree Art walkway were incorporated in the designs. And we were concerned about of course, the traffic, putting aside the fact that there will be some mixed use and businesses put into the building concepts, but definitely needing to look at the impact of the commercial impact on the environment if the commercial use is put in towards the middle of the park use. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Jorge, room 14.
Yeah, I'll try to be as brief as possible. I entered a few comments in the chat previously, but I'll hit the highlights here. A lot of concerns about the environment, about what this development will do to the environmental benefit that we currently have with the open space, and wanting to keep that to the greatest extent possible. Another thing is that all three concepts are very much taken out of context with the greater neighborhood and some of the opportunities for distressed properties and even completely vacant properties that are around the neighborhood that could be used for mixed use commercial or for the housing development. So a lot of the consensus in our group was for keeping the open space almost intact as it is, including some bike pathways. A connecting bike pathway from west of Colorado to east of Colorado would be great. Walking pathways, and maybe even considering developing the strip, the south edge of the golf course, which already has facilities and parking lots on it, which would be open, a little bit more common sense or efficient in terms of development, which all of these plans largely ignore.
Thank you. And last but not least, group 15, Liz.
Hi, we had a good discussion in group 15. Definitely some folks wanting to see more parkland and some wanting to see more housing in some of the concepts. In terms of the specifics, folks liked the housing closer to 40th in Colorado, or just making sure that any housing has good access to transit. And also liked seeing more of the commercial uses near 40th in Colorado as well.
Right. Well, thank you. Appreciate everyone taking a little bit of time. Want to talk quickly about next steps. Comments that you had tonight, we'll use those and we'll review them and incorporate those into a singular concept. Next steering committee is scheduled for April 12th at 5:30. Register via Zoom. The public is welcome to observe the steering committee's meetings. It's a little bit different than this type of meeting. And be on the lookout for a survey on the site concepts and recommendations later this spring. So with that, just a few housekeeping items very quickly. This meeting will be available online in English and Spanish. The CPD YouTube page is where you can find those. There'll be a link on our website as well. We'll have the Miro board link up for people to view. That will be locked, so we won't be able to add any more. However, we will have a link for a separate PDF where you can provide comments on the 3 framework concepts on the webpage. That'll be open for a week after this meeting. And once again, just a reminder about the short anonymous demographic survey pop-up that will happen upon exiting. So I appreciate everyone staying a little bit later. And I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. And with that, we will close the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you very much.